Right, Miatta, the thrust of the piece, though, in the Times from the Royal Society is that actually it could become as taboo as other things that people are frowned upon if they don't wear a seatbelt, drink driving, and various other habits. So there's this sort of nudge effect. Have you seen any evidence of that in terms of wearing a face mask?
No, not really. I mean, the stats on this are quite astounding. So our uptake of face masks about 25% in the UK as compared to 83% in Italy. And my take on this is that anything that can mitigate the spread of the virus ought to be done. The World Health Organization has updated its advice and said that actually people should be wearing face masks in public spaces, particularly crowded public spaces. And when we are easing lockdown at the rate that we are, when we are, doing things like reducing social distancing, reducing the 2-meter rule, then I think it makes sense to think about mitigating measures that we can put in place, like face masks, in order to make sure that we control the virus, which is still out there in our community. So I think actually, first and foremost, the government needs to reflect it in its guidance, and then social norms can follow that guidance.
All right, we'll leave it there and let's turn to the statement from Rishi Sunak. Obviously, this is going to be critically important in terms of the months ahead and the economic impact of coronavirus. Let's have a look at the front page of The Guardian. This is very much trailing a scheme that Rishi Sunak stakes £2 billion on job creation plan for the under-25s, a focus on youth here, subsidising the wages of young people for 25 hours a week, possibly helping up to 350,000 of those 18 to 24-year-olds who are on universal credit. And certainly it was designed to encourage companies to offer 6-month work placements. Miatta, will it work? Is it enough?
Look, I think it's a step in the right direction. I think this is a good move by the Chancellor. It mirrors a scheme that existed before the Future Jobs Fund. And I think it's right that he's trying to take decisive action to support jobs. But I think it needs to be matched by other measures. So, the thing I want to be seeing from the Chancellor is action to just protect jobs for other workers. So one of the things I think he has to do is stagger the unwinding of the furlough scheme so that sectors like culture, some parts of hospitality that for social distancing reasons cannot get back up on their feet are protected. But he's also got to create jobs, and lots of them, given the levels of unemployment that we're looking at. So he should be thinking about a big green fiscal stimulus. He said 3 billion. We think it should be closer to 28.3 billion to unlock about 400,000 green jobs. But as well, think about investing in things like public services, social care, health. We've got about 122,000 social care workers that we need. Those are jobs that could be created quickly if the government acts decisively.
Miatta, is that realistic when we could be looking at massive unemployment and consumer demand being quite low, despite what was said by Andrew Haldane from the Bank of England about a V-shaped recovery?
Yeah, look, so I don't think it's a question of left or right. I think there is a new consensus that's emerging that recognises that we are facing the deepest recession for 300 years. We're looking down the barrel of levels of unemployment we haven't seen for 40 years, and that we need drastic, radical action in order to just get back to normal. And actually, there is also a consensus that we don't just want to get back to the old normal, where we had living standards that were stagnant for a decade, where we had people on 0-hour wages. We want to build back better. And to do that, the government is going to have to step in. It is going to have to take bold, decisive action. So I actually welcome the fact that there is consensus across the political spectrum on this. It is completely right for the times. And if we want to talk about scale, so, the government, the Prime Minister talked about a New Deal. Brilliant. We like that as part of Build Back Better. But the 5 billion is about 0.2% of GDP. To give you a bit of context, after the financial crisis, we were spending 1.5% of GDP every year. And that was a far less severe crisis than this one. And as Chris said, Roosevelt was spending about 5% of GDP, a total of 40% in total. So we are nowhere near the scale that we need to be if we take this crisis as seriously as we ought.
All right, well, let me put that to Ant.
Yeah, look, we all want the space to have proper debate. I think actually unconscious bias training is something that everyone should go through. It's something that we do in our organisation, particularly for recruitment, because there are deep ingrained prejudices that people should be aware of, and being aware is the first step to trying to tackle it and act and behave in a different way. So I think, good on the Labour leader, and actually think it's really, really healthy that one of the things that Black Lives Matter movement has done is open up a debate about racism and systemic racism, and how it is, where it's come from, how it's reflecting in today's society. Because unless we're aware of it, unless we take it seriously, then we won't act. And there's stuff that we need to do in institutions that government needs to do, but there's stuff that we also need to do collectively. So this feels like an important moment, to quote Keir, but it is absolutely one that we need to take seriously and we need to act. And I'm waiting for that review that the government promised. It will become an equalities issue, and we shouldn't underestimate the crisis in the childcare sector. And by the way, it was a crisis that existed before the pandemic. In the poorest areas, 17% of childcare providers were already facing closure. It's a sector that's dogged by low pay, big staff turnover, so it needed reform anyway. And you add the pandemic, you add social distancing, you add the fact that parents are still nervous about sending their kids, and we've got a big problem. So I think it's one that the government needs to grip very quickly. We've been proposing that actually we should be thinking about a childcare infrastructure fund. The government loves infrastructure so much. We think actually it should care as much about social infrastructure as it does the hard kit. And actually that infrastructure fund should be direct payment to providers in order to cover the cost of staff as well as their overheads, and return providers should provide childcare to families that need it for free. That takes us a little bit closer to the sorts of systems that we see, for example, in Sweden that Chris referred to. But childcare is so essential to our society and our economy, and we absolutely need to start treating it in that way.